Everything in front of me is a completely unique, one-of-one item, and it is just a small part of my collection that runs to the tens of thousands of items, every single one of which is a one-of-one primary source document of history, and it's why postal history stands head and shoulders above every other collecting field when it comes to historical relevance. You see, almost every other collectibles market is comprised of items that are produced by one entity, either governmental or private, that are then distributed to some sort of consumer base. Included in this list of markets is comic books, cards, toys, advertising, books, coins, wine, bottles, license plates, beanie babies, ceramics, posters, and even stamps. And because all of those markets have items that are produced in quantity, what collecting ends up becoming is a population report of how many of any given item are still extant and what kind of condition that item is in order to establish value. And that just isn't true of postal history. Let me show you what I'm talking about. This is the first cover I ever spent real money on, say north of $200. It has 3 lines of text, 1 stamp, and 1 postal marking, and I'm going to tell you what I've learned from this cover over the years. First of all, it was mailed June 22nd, 1876. We know this because that's the period where the stamp was used, as well as my private log of Fort Laramie postmark usage dates, as well as the fact that that was the summer that General Crook commanded an expedition out of Fort Fetterman. As a matter of fact, just 5 days before this was mailed to Lieutenant Capron, Crook had just been defeated at the Battle of the Rosebud by Crazy Horse during the Great Sioux War, and he was on retreat to Fort Fetterman in order to resupply and await reinforcements. And just 3 days after it was mailed, the Battle of the Little Bighorn occurred, and Custer, along with his entire force of men, was killed on the battlefield. Now, contemporary historians oftentimes blame General Crook for being out of position and leading to Custer's death, but in more modern times, we all know that Custer was a butcher and a maniac, and he led his men to certain death, and it wouldn't have mattered if Crook was there or not. As a matter of fact, these conflicts impacted Crook so deeply that after his retirement, he became a vocal advocate for natives amongst military brass and in Washington. In addition to that, Lieutenant Capron's diary did survive the ravages of history, and we know that on June 22nd, he received word from his wife that his 2-year-old son Henry had just died, and he secured permission just 5 days later, just 2 days after the death of Custer, to ride and console his wife, a feat that he did in just 24 hours, riding 90 miles from Fort Laramie to Fort Fetterman. Keep in mind that at this point in time, 15 to 20 miles a day was considered to be a good clip for troop movement. And everything I own is just like that, if not even better, because most of them have not 1 but 2 geographical locations, not just a city, but right down to an address, as well as 2 human beings that are associated with those addresses. You also have the stamp and the postal markings establishing dates, as well as showing what routes that specific item took in order to get from point A to point B, and even sometimes using the construction of the envelope itself for forensics clues. For example, during the Civil War, they created these adversity covers, which were made out of wallpaper in the South when there was a scarcity of paper due to wartime activities. And that's all before you even consider that if you actually have the enclosure that was originally mailed in the envelope, it's an entirely new wealth of information. There is absolutely no comparison for intimacy with both history and humanity to postal history. And if you're collecting in any way, shape, or form and think you're collecting history and you're not looking at this format, you're definitely kidding yourself, my friend, and you better recognize.